Alright, problem number 4 says that the average of all 5 of Carlos's test grades is exactly 84. The average of his first 3 grades is exactly 80. What is the average of his last 2 grades? Okay, so my hint to you would be, remember the definition of an average. When you take an average, you add up all of the numbers you want to average and divide by the number of numbers, right? And that gives you the average. So don't let it bother you that we don't know Carlos's 5 test grades. So write out what an average is and set it equal to 84 and see what you get. You can actually define a variable even. You could call it S5, just call it that, and say that that's equal to the sum of the first 5 test grades. Okay, so you could define something like that and then use the definition of an average and work with that. Okay, so there's a hint to get you started, and I'm going to give you the solution now. So, okay, I've given you a hint. Let's just work with this. If I say that S5 is the sum of the first 5 test grades, then I know that the average would be the sum S5 over 5, and that would be equal to 84, right? And we're given that. So, given that, I can actually find out that S5 is equal to 5 times 84. And if I do that, if I take 5 times 84, I get 420. Okay, so I know the sum of the first 5 test grades is 420. I also know that the average of the first 3 test grades is 80. So I can do something similar for that as well. I could define a variable called S3. And I could say that that's equal to the sum of the first 3 test grades. Just realizing I don't have an S out here. Alright, and then we would know that S3 over 3 is equal to 80, right? That's what we're given. Okay, that's just a definition of a average, right? So given that, if I multiply both sides by 3 to get rid of the 3 on the bottom here, then I know that S3 is equal to 3 times 80, which is 240, right? Alright, so now I've found the sum of the first 5 test grades, and I've found the sum of the first 3 test grades. And they're asking for what is the average of the last 2 test grades. And you know that if you had those test grades, you could just add those 2 test grades, divide it by 2, and you get the number that you're looking for. But we don't have those 2 test grades individually, but we can actually figure out what the sum of those 2 test grades are, or what it is, because we're given the sum of the first 5 and the sum of the first 3. So if we subtract the 2, we will get the sum of the last 2, right? So if I take S5 minus S3, right, and that's equal to 420 minus 240, and that would give you 180. So 180 is the sum of those last 2 grades. And if we want to find the average, if we're given the sum, then we can just use a definition of an average. So we're 180 over 2 has to be the average of the last 2 test grades, and that gives us 90. Pretty cool. So we don't know any of the individual test grades, but we're still able to figure out what the average of the last 2 is.